What's going on, everybody? I'm yours truly, the Guru, from 247miami.tv's In the Bleachers. You can also find me tonight at 7 o'clock on Celtics Talk Radio. And when hockey season kicks off, you will find me on the Boston Bruins Breakdown Show. I'm here today to talk about the college football season. The top 25 poll for the preseason has just been released. And here we go. Number 25, receiving 135 votes, the Oregon State Beavers. Number 24, the USC Trojans, receiving 165 votes. Number 23, receiving 172 votes, the Wisconsin Badgers. Number 22, receiving 186 votes. People have known them as a Cinderella team, but I consider them now as not a top contender, but a serious contender for the Big Ten, the Northwestern Wildcats. A potential sleeper for me in the Pacific 12 Conference, coming in at number 21 with 202 votes, the UCLA Bruins. Like I said it, I'm going to say it again. I think they are a sleeper team. Watch out for them, Pac-12. Number 20, receiving 400 votes, the TCU Horned Frogs. Number 19, receiving 420 votes, the Boise State Broncos. Number 18, receiving 426 votes, the Nebraska Cornhuskers. Number 17, receiving 589 votes, a kid beat cancer, and he called it Michigan, and they sit number 17 in the preseason poll. Number 16, receiving 620 votes, the Oklahoma Sooners. Number 15, one of the most recognized, most beloved, best college football schools ever. Number 15, receiving 622 votes, the Texas Longhorns. Number 14, receiving 726 votes, the Oklahoma State Cowboys. Number 13, receiving 797 votes, and plays in the toughest conference in all of college football and throughout the land, the LSU Tigers, who will be an opponent for the Florida Gators. We'll talk more about that later. Number 12, all coming from the top side of the Sunshine State, receiving 844 votes, rally to tally, the Florida State Seminoles. Number 11, a team that came so close but fell so short in the national championship game, receiving 872 votes, the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Number 10, one Notre Dame loss away from possibly going to the national championship game. Now they play in the toughest conference known to man. Receiving 930 votes, number 10 is the University of Florida Gators. They are the best team ranked in the Sunshine State. Number 9, the team that beat the Florida Gators in the All-State Sugar Bowl, receiving 1,010 votes, the Louisville Cardinals. And number 8, a tough opponent in the ACC Conference, a relatively tough conference. They could definitely give FSU some trouble, receiving 1,047 votes, the Clemson Tigers. Number 7, receiving 1,136 votes. This is a team that also plays in the SEC and has a former Florida Gator coach coaching them, and may I say he's been a very successful coach for the number 7 ranked South Carolina Gamecocks. Number 6, receiving 1,215 votes, a team that has the defending Heisman Trophy winner, the Texas A&M Aggies, the only team to take down the defending national champion, Alabama Crimson Tide. Number 5, a team that also plays in the SEC. The SEC, like I said, is very dominant, and you will find a lot of the teams there in the top 10, receiving 1,250 votes. Florida's biggest rivals and most bitter rival, they play at a neutral site every Halloween in Jacksonville, the Georgia Bulldogs. Number 4, a team without Andrew Luck, but a team that has not stumbled at all since his departure, receiving 1,262 votes. Number 4 is the Stanford Cardinal. Number 3, one of the toughest opponents in the Pac-12, receiving 1,397 votes. They just lost their coach, but they have that look that just says, we have not lost a step. The number 3 team is the Oregon Ducks. Number 2, receiving 1,427 votes. Their bowl ban has been lifted. They had their first ever unbeaten or untied season, and they have a very capable coach in Urban Meyer. Number 2, receiving 1,427 votes and 3 first place votes, the Ohio State Buckeyes. By the way, I forgot to mention that the Texas A&M Aggies received 1 first place vote. And number 1, no surprise at all, Nick Saban as their head coach, the 2-time defending champion. They've won 3 titles in 4 years, receiving 1,545 votes, and the rest of the 58 first place votes, you guessed it, you got it right, the Alabama Crimson Tide. Now, here's my breakdown on this season's preseason poll. Obviously, Alabama, number 1 in the country. No surprise there. Number 2, the Ohio State Buckeyes, coming off of a 12-0 season. The only reason why they could not contend for the national title is because they were under a bowl ban. So I am not surprised to see Ohio State at number 2. I am definitely looking at them. Urban Meyer is a very good coach. I'm going to be taking that team very, very seriously. Number 3, Oregon. Oregon is a speedster running team. They can get up and down the field in 2 minutes or less, which is a very big thing. They can score on you in a heartbeat. They can grab momentum within a second. And that's actually very important. So, number 3, Oregon, I got a lot of respect for that one. Stanford, kind of surprised them being at number 4, being the season that they had. They had, I believe it was in between 3 and 5 losses. But something is definitely needs to be seen with this Stanford Cardinal team. But I'm definitely going to be looking at them this season. So, high hopes for the Cardinal this season. I definitely think that they may give Oregon some trouble and they can walk away with the Pac-12 title, but it's not going to be an easy task dealing with UCLA, USC, and Oregon. Number 5, the Georgia Bulldogs, a team that was 1 victory away from facing Notre Dame in the national championship game. They lost 32-28 at the hands of the Alabama Crimson Tide in the SEC championship game. They definitely deserve their spot. They've definitely earned their spot. Aaron Murray should have another great season. Definitely, I agree with number 5 being Georgia Bulldogs. Number 6, I think this team should be ranked higher than 6. The Texas A&M Aggies. A&M has Johnny Manziel. Right now, he looks like an immature little party boy, but he is a very capable quarterback and a very capable college football player. And, of course, he is the Heisman Trophy winner and defending Heisman Trophy winner. I think they should definitely be in the top 5, maybe even in the top 3. I think they should be where Oregon is at, personally. Number 7, the South Carolina Gamecocks. I think they're a little overranked. They were slaughtered by the Florida Gators. I don't know how they managed to find themselves so high up in the polls every single season. I don't think they should be in the top 7. I don't even think they should be in the top 10, personally. But South Carolina is a very good team. They do play in a very tough SEC conference, so you got to give them props for that. They will be playing the Florida Gators this year in Columbia, and they will be playing the Georgia Bulldogs as well. So they'll definitely have a strong proving ground to prove why they belong there. Number 8, the Clemson Tigers. Not so sure about that one. They didn't win the ACC. They did not win the ACC. So, kind of surprised that it's not Florida State up there. I really am. But they do have like I said, they have a little bit of a proving ground, and they will prove, and I think they can prove why they belong in the top 10. The Clemson Tigers this year will kick off their season against number 5 Georgia, so that's going to be a huge game. Their schedule is the Georgia Bulldogs, number 5 in the country, South Carolina State. Notable games are going to be versus Georgia, at NC State, versus Florida State, at South Carolina. I think those are the games that they're going to need to win in order to prove why they belong in the top 10 right now. Number 9, Louisville, obviously coming off of a Sugar Bowl victory. I definitely need to see what they're going to do this year, and let's see if they definitely belong in the top 10. Number 10, the University of Florida Gators. I think they're underranked, and I'll tell you why. The teams they beat last year, they were expected to lose against, and that was the LSU Tigers in the swamp. They were expected to lose against the South Carolina Gamecocks, and they blew them out in the swamp. They went up to Doak Campbell Stadium in Tallahassee and beat the Florida State Seminoles 37-26. Their losses were to Georgia in Jacksonville and Louisville in the Sugar Bowl. They only lost 2 games. I think they should be higher than number 10. I think they belong in the top 7. Notable games for them. At Hurricanes. This is going to be battle for the Seminole War Canoe and their first matchup in 5 years. Versus Tennessee. It's a rivalry game. Third Saturday of September game. It's a rivalry game if they have beaten them, I believe, is 7 or 8 times in a row already. So, and Tennessee is not a pushover team at all. They proved that last year in Knoxville. They're not a pushover team. Another notable game will be at LSU in Death Valley. Death Valley is not an easy place to play at all, especially if you're the Florida Gators, especially if you're them, because LSU and Florida are bitter rivals. They are. It's not easy for LSU to come into the swamp, and it's not easy for the Gators to go into Death Valley and take on the Tigers. Notable game, obviously, it's going to be in Jacksonville versus the Georgia Bulldogs. Georgia Bulldogs beat them 2 years in a row already. So Florida's going to have a bitter taste in their mouth, and I think they can actually pull out a win in this one. At South Carolina. Actually, before I get to South Carolina, versus Vanderbilt and at Missouri and versus Arkansas. I bring up these 3 teams because these are potential trap games, maybe even versus Toledo, which is going to be their first game of the year. Toledo is right before their rivalry game against the U. Arkansas is the game right before the LSU Tigers. Arkansas will be coming into the swamp. Toledo will be coming into the swamp. Missouri, they're going to be going up to Mizzou to take on the Tigers. And that's before they go to Jacksonville to take on the Bulldogs. Versus Vanderbilt, they're coming to the swamp. That's a game right before they travel to Columbia to take on the South Carolina Gamecocks. And you know what? I'm going to throw this one in there. I don't think it's that big a trap game, but in the swamp and right before Florida State, you just never know. Georgia Southern. Those are potential trap games for the Florida Gators. And that pretty much wraps up my breakdown of the top 10. Since this is 24/7 Miami, I'm going to start off with the Miami team. I'm going to break down the University of Miami, Florida Hurricanes. And I'm going to tell you what I think they're going to do this year. Versus the Florida Atlantic Owls, who are now in the Conference USA. I think they should blow them out in Coral Gables. That should be an easy blowout. Saturday, September 7th. Versus the Florida Gators. They're playing a highly ranked University of Florida team. UM is not the same program it was when they were taking on the Gators and beating them, so I'm going to have to give that one to Florida. I'm giving them 1-1. Versus Savannah State, that's a win, so 2-1. At South Florida. South Florida, to me, is a bit of an underrated team. I think that's going to be a close win for the University of Miami Hurricanes. So I have them sitting at 3-1. Versus Georgia Tech, that should be a win. That should be about a 7 to 14 point win. So I've got them sitting at 4-1, 1-0 in conference play. At North Carolina, they beat them last year in Miami. I believe it was 18 to 14. I expect another loss for the Miami Hurricanes at the hands of North Carolina, especially going to their house. So I've got them right now sitting at 4-2, 1-1. Versus Wake Forest, that's a win. That should be a solid, at least 2 touchdown win. The Wake Forest Demon Deacons. That will put them at 5-2, 2-1. Florida State, that's a loss. Loss. So with that, that'll put them, I have them now at 2-2 in conference play. Versus Virginia Tech, loss. I think they're going to lose to Virginia Tech. So there's another drop in conference play. The Duke Blue Devils, that's a win. Virginia Cavaliers, that's a win. And the Pittsburgh Panthers, I'm actually going to put that one as a loss. So their final record will be a win against Florida Atlantic, loss against Florida, Savannah State win, South Florida win, Georgia Tech win, North Carolina loss, Wake Forest win, Florida State loss, Virginia Tech loss, Duke win, Virginia win, and Pittsburgh loss. So I've got them going 7-5 overall. And like I said, Georgia Tech win, North Carolina loss, Wake Forest win, Florida State loss, Virginia Tech loss, Duke win, Virginia win, Pittsburgh loss. So I've got them going 7-5 overall, 4-4 in conference play. Last year they were 25th overall in passing yards, 295.4 per game. Rushing yards, they were 83rd overall with 144.8 per game. Points for, 49th overall with 31.4, and points against, 84th overall with 30.5. They really need to cut down on that if they expect to win games and win more games. Let's move on to another Florida team here in our beautiful Sunshine State. I'm keeping it in the ACC. This time I'm just switching divisions. UM is in the Coastal Division, and Florida State, who I'm jumping on now, is in the Atlantic Division. Let's start breaking them down, shall we? They're playing on the road at Pittsburgh. I'm giving them a win, 1-0 in overall right now and in conference play. Versus Nevada at Doak Campbell Stadium, that's a win. So, 2-0. Bethune-Cookman at their house, and by their house I mean FSU, that's a win, 3-0. At Boston College, that's a win, 4-0, 2-0. Versus Maryland, that's a win, 5-0, 3-0. At Clemson, that's a loss, 5-1, 3-1. Versus NC State, they lost to them last year at NC State House. They're going to win this one, 6-1, 4-1. They're going to beat UM, 7-1. I believe I have them now at 5-1. Wake Forest, that's a win, 8-1, 6-1. Syracuse at Florida State, that's another win. Versus Idaho, that's a win. At Florida, that will be a loss. So I have Florida State losing only 2 games and losing only 1 game in conference play. So I've got them going 10-2 overall and 7-1 in conference play. Let's break down what they did last year. Passing yards, they were 40th overall, 264.9 per game. Rushing yards, they were 24th overall with 205 per game. Points for 10th overall with 39.3. And this is the big one. Points against 6th overall with 14.7. 14.7. They were pitching blowouts. They were going with 25-point victories. That was their average, which is very important. It not only is it showing victories, it's showing dominance. So I have FSU having another good season. Now we move on to the Florida Gators, who are number 10 ranked overall in the preseason poll, playing in the SEC. I came to this a little earlier, but now I'm going to actually break it down for you. Their first game of the season is at the Swamp. Their home opener will be against Toledo. That's a win. I have them over UM in Coral Gables. That's a win. Versus Tennessee, I have them winning that game. So that'll be 3-0, 1-0. At Kentucky, that's a win. 4-0, 2-0. Versus Arkansas, that's a win in the Swamp. 5-0, 3-0. This is where things can get tricky. At LSU in Death Valley, I have them losing that one. 5-1, 3-1. At Missouri, that's a win. 6-1, 4-1. Versus Georgia, I said it earlier, that's going to be 7-1 and 5-1. Versus Vanderbilt, that's a win. That'll put them at 8-1, 6-1. And at South Carolina, I'm going to put that one as a win. That'll put them at 9-1, 7-1 in conference play. Versus Georgia Southern at the Swamp, that's a win. And versus Florida State at the Swamp, that's a win. I have them going 11-1 and 7-1 in conference play. It is possible that they can go 12-0, but I don't want to overhype this team. I think they'll go between 10-2 and 12-0. Oh no, excuse me. Let me make it better for you. 9-3 and 12-0. The 3 losses they would have would be at LSU, at South Carolina, and versus Florida State. And you know what? I can't take this one for granted. Versus Georgia, so that's 8-4. And you know what? UM is not an easy opponent at their house. Battle for the Seminole War, Canoe, anything can happen. So I'm gonna go between 7-5 and 12-0, which is a pretty big gap. Pretty big. I think they're going to go 11-1. That's going to be my final prediction. Saying it on the record. In between 7-5 and 12-0, I've got them going 11-1. Their one loss will be at LSU in Death Valley. Alright. That pretty much wraps up everything about the college football preseason. My predictions for our Florida teams. The top 25, my thoughts on the top 10. If you like to comment, you're more than welcome to. This is going to be a video blog going on 247miami.tv's in the bleachers. Make sure to tune in at 7 o'clock because I will be on Celtics Talk Radio along with Jarrett Allen, Daniel Camacho, and Alex Hawkins. Igor Medic will not be in on tonight's show, unfortunately. He's dealing with personal issues. We wish him all the best. I'm Gabriel Yanis, a.k.a. The Guru. This has been a video blog for 247miami.tv's in the bleachers. And I will be seeing you on my next video blog, and I'll be seeing you in the bleachers and on the talk radio. For now, this is goodbye. Thank you for listening and thank you for tuning in.